the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom that's being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's the Big's Idea? Our semi-regular podcast. So, we got Rosendale, we got Gaetz, we got Crane, and we have me. I don't see, my lips aren't moving while I'm talking. So,
what is going on? Andy, are you all right, man?
I am all right. We're going to press forward, even if we have some technical difficulties, because the country's got some strange issues. So I've got everybody. I want you to know we have with us great guests: Matt Gaetz from Florida, Eli Crane from Arizona, and Matt Rosendale from Montana. And so, guys, let's start. Matt, where are we with regard to budgeting, spending, shutdown, and let's just free-flowing conversation. Have at it.
You got two Matts. Which one are you talking to?
Gaetz.
Okay, so look, the Big's idea right now that we're trying to defeat is the notion of governing by continuing resolution. We've just stepped off the House floor where we voted against a Republican strategy that had as its premise that we were going to surrender to the Democrats everything Joe Biden wanted on every other spending priority just so that we could pick a fight on the border. And as virtuous as a border fight is, and I know the folks here would agree with that as strong as anyone, there's no reason for us to surrender everything else. We believe that only with a review of each spending bill are you able to drain the swamp, drive down spending. So that's what we're fighting for. And I know all of you join me in calling on Chuck Schumer, bring up the veteran spending bill today. Bring up the military spending bill. Make sure you have our Border Patrol paid for by bringing up our Homeland spending bill. These are the core functions of government, and we're fighting to keep those funded while resisting some of the most treacherous features of the Biden agenda.
Rosendale.
Every legislature across the nation utilizes an appropriations process. Most of them meet for shorter periods of time than we here in Congress do. And somehow they're able to accomplish passing a budget. Oh, by the way, a balanced budget and all of their policy issues in a much more condensed fashion. And yet we are here today because, quite frankly, our leadership refused to bring forward the very appropriation bills that we're trying to pass and to allow us to do our job. So my question today is, okay, we've passed out 4 appropriation bills. The Senate can go ahead and bring those up and pass them now. Make sure that 3/4, 80% of the federal government can continue. And why don't we have leadership schedule up right now, instead of focusing energy, attention, and time on trying to develop another swampy solution to funding government? Bring up the balance of the appropriation bills. We're all here. We'll go ahead and get our work done. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And let's get this show wrapped up as we are charged by statute to do.
Eli Crane.
It's an honor to be here with these guys. Basically, big picture is everybody knows we have a massive spending problem in this country. We got about $33 trillion in national debt. We bring in about $5 trillion in taxes every year. We spend about $7 trillion in taxes every year. You guys know that doesn't add up. And this government just wants to spend more money. So those of us and some other members of Congress are trying to change the way this works so that we pump the brakes on spending so that your kids and grandkids have a chance at having a financial future. And this town does not like that very much. That's why it's called the swamp. And like Congressman Gaetz and others were talking about, they want to continue funding the government with the same continuing resolution, omnibus style, one up or down vote to fund the entire government. And it's garbage. You guys know out there, whether you're running a business or your own personal finances, that if you had a spending problem, if you were in massive debt, you would create a top line budget number, and then you would go in and you would look at everything in your budget, and you would cut out all the stuff that you don't need, and you would make cuts to your food bill, eating out, you would make cuts to your clothing, how much clothing you're buying, all the things that you spend money on. Well, the best way to do that in the federal government is to do the 12 appropriations bills, not to have a continuing resolution or an omnibus. And this town doesn't want to do it because the sad truth of the matter is that even a lot of Republicans don't want to quit spending money that we don't have. Okay. And it also, when we govern by CR, it also allows them to kind of cloak themselves and not show you what they're voting for and what they're not voting for. Because they can vote for something bad in that continuing resolution, or that omnibus, like sending $30 million over to Zimbabwe to teach LGBTQ curriculum to kids over there, and if you call them out or question them on it, they say, well, but we had to fund the troops, or we had to fund this or that, and so. Like I said, the best way to cut this stuff out is to do the individual 12 appropriations bills. That's what this group is fighting to do. I'm hoping that we're successful in it, but that's my summary of where we're at.
And Andy, if you don't mind, I want to double tap one of Eli's efforts, because when you do the single subject bills, then you can offer amendments, and that forces people to vote for or against federal spending. So one issue that Eli was leading on the floor the other day was foreign aid. We fund an entity called USAID, which is using your money, the taxpayer money, to do venture capital economic development in other countries. Eli introduced the amendment to do that, but my friend, our fellow Republicans crossed over and voted with the Democrats to deficit spend in our country so that we could do economic development in other countries. But nonetheless, I was real proud of you in that fight you were leading.
Yeah, I would say all of you guys have really fought the fight, and I want to ask you guys this, because this thought occurred to me. We're sitting now in Washington D.C., and everybody in this bubble, and it is a bubble. It's different than any place else in the country. The only thing that ever gets their attention is when they have to live by the rules and the laws and be accountable, because they have to live to the choices they make. So when we push the fight on these guys, these men and women, they have to pay attention to it, because, and you see the panic in everybody's eyes, like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to do something. But I'm always afraid that they're going to do the wrong thing again, because over 25 years, they've done 130 continuing resolutions. They've just kept spending at the same rate instead of trying to get at it. Are we going to be able to see the change? And I guess I'm throwing it out to you three guys. What are we going to see next? What do you think we're going to see next at this point?
Go ahead, Rosendale.
So I think that we demonstrated very clearly, this team that's on with your podcast, Biggs, and several others, there's probably about 24, that said, we are not going to revert back to the days of old of just utilizing continuing resolutions and omnibuses. And when this starts getting way down in the weeds for most of your listeners, but by voting down the rule and taking down the Department of Defense appropriations bill last week, 2 times we sent a clear message to the conference, to leadership, that we were going to demand all appropriation bills be brought forward. That's what actually was the origins of the 4 appropriation bills being discussed, debated, negotiated, amended on the floor this week. I think everybody that's on this podcast right now would agree. That's what really brought that to a head. And when we had our meeting last Thursday, where the broad section, cross section of the conference sat down from most conservative to the least conservative, and we said, how are we going to move forward? That's when the agreement was made. Okay, well, we're going to bring 4 appropriation bills up, bills that actually show reductions in spending so that we can see a good faith effort by leadership to show that we're going to go through this process. And I'm also just as convinced that if we back off of that pressure 1 iota, that they will immediately revert back to the olds. Because look, power has been consolidated here into the hands of a few, and power is never relinquished voluntarily. You have to take it away. And this is what it looks like when you start removing power from a few individuals and redistributing it back to each of the members of the House of Representatives.
Gaetz, what's happened next? What happens next?
A lot of name calling. We're at the biblical name calling portion of disputes. I just got a report that Mike Lawler said that he's a freshman congressman from New York, and he said that I am not a conservative Republican, that I am a party of one, and that I am a charlatan. So I'll get my blanket and curl up in the corner and, call my therapist and see how to work through all of the hurt feelings.
Yeah. So once we move through the ad hominem attacks, though, Eli,
Right.
what's going, Gaetz, Eli?
Well, no, I mean, I think we've shown what works and what doesn't. What doesn't work is trying to pass continuing resolutions. What does work is rolling up our sleeves and getting onto these single subject bills and moving them. So you know what ought to happen next? We ought to bring the energy and water bill forward. We ought to bring the bill forward so that we can take a meat cleaver to the budget at the Department of Justice and the FBI and the ATF, these agencies that have been turned against our people. And we have got to liberate ourselves from this theory that the only way anything can be funded is what it was funded last year, and then we debate about how much more money to print, how much to devalue what our constituents have saved their whole lives to earn so that people can live their wild spending fantasies here in Washington. That's what we're fighting against.
Eli.
Well, you guys know this town much better than me. I think the Uniparty is going to do what the Uniparty does. But the thing, one of the big wins that I've been talking about is that because we've been working on the appropriations bills, and like Matt Gaetz just alluded to, people had to take votes on amendments. I'm hoping that the constituents pay attention to that, who voted on what, and maybe primary some of the weaker members of Congress and send us some actual fighters so that we can grow our numbers and therefore, grow your representation up here in Washington, D.C.
So I want, for people who don't understand, a continuing resolution in its basic form just basically says we're going to continue the same policies and the same spending of the last year's budget. Okay, so that you just go on autopilot kind of. And then, but what we're required to under 1974 law is we're supposed to pass 12 different spending bills. So like your Department of Defense, Homeland Security, water, federal and state government operations, those types of things. There are separate bills, but they all work together. So you know how much you're going to spend overall, but you're supposed to attack each one of those areas. But what's happened for 25 years is that has not happened. You've got a version of continuing resolution 3 times. You've had year-long continuing resolution. So as we sit here, I think what's going to happen, I'm going to throw a prediction. And last thing before we go, because we're all in meetings constantly fighting on discussing and debating this stuff with our friends, is I think what's going to happen is that we're going to be back on the floor tomorrow for a CR that probably won't pass. And somewhere along the pike, the Senate's going to send us their continuing resolution. It is horrible. And I think you're going to see, like the guys who call Matt Gaetz, whatever they call him here, and call us names and don't want to get with us. I think they're going to join with Democrats to pass that bill out. That's what I would suggest is going to happen. You guys, final thoughts on this stuff before we go. Start, Eli, go first.
What was that last thing, Andy?
Final thoughts on all that's happening before we go to yours and my constituents?
Well, I appreciate everybody who supported us along the way. Everybody who's gone into this with us, just supporting us, praying for us, understanding that you don't get yourself out of a mess like we're in this country without, some inconvenience, some pain, for good people. And that's not something that we want. It's not something that we take lightly, but just understand this. If we're going to get ourselves out of this mess, not only is it going to take a fight, but it's not always going to be comfortable. And those of us on this show, and there's several other members of Congress, are willing to, wage war on your behalf. And we hope that you continue to support us in this endeavor so that we can continue to turn this conference to the right.
30 seconds, Rosendale.
30 seconds.
He can't say hello in 30 seconds.
I find it fascinating that every time we pass one of these appropriation bills, the rousing cheer that comes across the conference after we've been able to drag them to the altar and get them to work on these very subjects. Everybody says that this is what they want, but when you ask them about helping us get there, it's just a struggle. But then after they've been brought to the altar, they celebrate and rejoice with us as they go through it. So my final thought is, hold hands, folks. Come with the rest of the conference. Help us bring the rest of these appropriation bills forward so that we don't have to have a discussion about the government slowdown, which is what I call it. We can go ahead and complete the job that we were sent up here to do.
Thanks, Matt. Gaetz, Mr. Gaetz.
Right now you're hearing the media of all stripes and even some of the voices that you may trust say that we're extreme and radicals and that we're the chaos caucus. The reality is we believe that America today is in a state of chaos because of the way we've been doing things for the last several decades. And the way to crowbar ourselves away from that chaos is to follow the law, is to go back to the very budgeting system that a family uses, that our state's legislatures use, and that ensures that priorities have to withstand review and scrutiny. That is what we are fighting for. We appreciate your support in that fight, your prayers, and we need you to be online digital warriors. We need you out there helping us to promote these arguments so they win based on merit. And thank you, Andy.
Thanks, you guys. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to serve alongside these three freedom fighters. And we have others with us, that have been so good about standing up. This is a crucible. We got people that are attacking us constantly in our own party because we're trying to hold them accountable and restore us back to a limited government, a balanced budget, and it's an uphill battle. And I mean it. This town does not want to change, and so we're trying to inspire them to change, and where we can, use leverage to get them to change. It's not comfortable, but I'll tell you, in the end, if we are able to effectuate this change, this country will be on a path of fiscal responsibility and freedom, personal freedom, and that's really what we're all about. I join my friends in thanking you for your support. We need your prayers. And Matt, I love what you said, Mr. Gaetz. I love what you said about be digital warriors. Rosendale, you're right. We need their support. Eli, you're right. We need everybody's support as we try to go forward, because I can tell you what, the second I get off this, I've got to go into another meeting where they're going to try to kneecap me. So God bless each and every one of you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to my good friends, Eli Crane from Arizona, Matt Rosendale from Montana, and Matt Gaetz from Florida. And we'll keep fighting for you, and I'll keep you